Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin. Kindly take your seats. I see that most of us are already sitting. There are a few on the left and at the back that should take their seats and free the aisle, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call the session to order. I invite the delegates to take their seats. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I declare open the third session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastic Pollution. To start off this session, I would like to invite our Executive Secretary, Mr. Jyoti Mathur-Philippe, to provide her opening remarks. Mr. Mathur-Philippe, Mrs. Mathur-Philippe, you have the floor.
Excellency William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Madam Inger Anderson, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Ambassador Meza Quadra, Chair of the INC, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I stand before you today with a profound sense of purpose and optimism as we convene for the third session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to develop an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. On behalf of the Secretariat and me, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this important session. Nature is suffocating, gasping for breath. All ecosystems, terrestrial and marine, are under threat from plastic pollution. Not only vulnerable and endangered species are at risk, but all diversity of life on our planet hangs in a balance. Our own health is at stake too. Burning plastic waste has been linked to increased risk of heart diseases, and aggravating respiratory problems and microplastics have been found in human blood and accumulate in our organs. We hold in our hands the power to correct this destructive course that our actions have led us on, and hopefully heal the planet we call our home. We need to plot a new course on plastics to preserve the intricate and fragile web of life that sustains us all. Let me begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to the government of Kenya for hosting our proceedings here in Nairobi. It was here in Nairobi that in March last year, member states came together in a spirit of ambition, cooperation, and compromise to adopt the historic UNEP resolution that has paved our path to being here today. A heartfelt appreciation goes to the many donors whose generous contributions have made this gathering possible. Our thanks go to the governments of Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Japan, Monaco, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America, and to the European Commission. I wish to recognize our chair, Ambassador Meza Quadra, whose strong and committed leadership has been instrumental during the preparations for our third session. We are also grateful to the members of the Bureau who have provided helpful advice and guidance throughout the intersessional period. Let me also acknowledge and thank our colleagues from the Secretariats of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, the Montreal Protocol, the Minamata Convention, and the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And once again, your experience and support have been invaluable till now. We are also grateful for the amazing support provided by the Communications Division, Law Division, and Governance Affairs Office of the United Nations Environment Programme. Above all, please allow me to thank our INC Secretariat team who have worked tirelessly to ensure the timely preparation of this session. I am also delighted with the ever-growing interest in our negotiations, and I warmly welcome all stakeholders to this session. I have kept my pledge to you, made at our second session in Paris, as we have managed to increase the overall capacity of our venue here in Nairobi to make sure that all of you can be accommodated. At the preparatory meeting held 2 days ago, we had a constructive dialogue and exchange of views. I'm confident that delegates will build on their constructive spirit over the course of the next 7 days to further develop the international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. Distinguished delegates, this third session marks the midpoint of our process. This is where all our work begins again after INC-1 and INC-2. It is up to all of us gathered here and now in Nairobi to ensure that we are on track to delivering an agreement on plastic pollution by the end of 2024, in line with the mandate we received at the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly. This is not a mere goal, it is a necessity. we must work collectively, ensuring all views are heard so that we can build consensus and move forward swiftly to fulfill our mandate. With this, I will say thank you and welcome once again to our beautiful UN compound.
Thank you, Ms. Matur-Philippe. I will now provide my own opening remarks. Your Excellency William Samoei Ruto, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces of the Republic of Kenya, Madam Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Madam Executive Secretary, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is my honor to declare open the third session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastic Pollution. I would like to begin by thanking our host, the Government of Kenya, for the warm welcome here in Nairobi. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Ms. Inger Anderson, for making available these facilities for our session. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to our Executive Secretary and the Secretariat team for their tireless work to ensure the successful organization of this session, as well as their diligent efforts to prepare the necessary working documents for our meeting. My thanks goes also to my dear friends, the members of the Bureau of the Committee, who have provided valuable advice from the regions over the intersessional period. The urgency of addressing plastic pollution cannot be overstated. Plastic waste continues to inundate our oceans, harm wildlife, and infiltrate our ecosystems. It poses a direct threat to our environment, human health, and the delicate balance of our planet. We are privileged as we have been given the responsibility of addressing this crisis in an effective and comprehensive manner. We have the collective power to change this trajectory. We have witnessed promising initiatives around the world that demonstrate change is possible, but to make a difference at the scale required, we must work collectively. The transnational nature of plastic pollution demands international cooperation and legally binding instruments to guide our efforts. During our first and second session, and through the many submissions received during the intersessional period, we have heard and captured a wealth of views presented by members and observers. We are eager and ready to hear more of your views during this session, knowing that only open and broad discussion can bring consensus. We are convinced that through a dialogue and consensus, we will advance our negotiations. We held a successful preparatory meeting on Saturday, during which delegates engaged in an open, constructive manner, ensuring that all views are heard. The meeting laid helpful groundwork for our session this week, and I want to commend the constructive spirit of all delegations. I am confident that we can start our deliberations in the same spirit of cooperation and understanding. We now have had the opportunity to have the first round of discussions on all elements of the future instrument, albeit some in a less formal setting so far. This week is the time for delegates to dig in and advance the text using the zero draft as a starting point. It is my hope that by the end of the session, the committee will agree on a mandate for a revised draft and possible intersessional work to prepare for the 4th and 5th sessions. I am confident that we can make substantive progress here at our 3rd session and capitalize on the Nairobi spirit of consensus and ambition that brought us the mandate to negotiate this instrument. I would like to reiterate my strong commitment to this process and to ensure the success of our 3rd session here in Nairobi. Thank you, and let us begin our work with determination and resolve. It is now my pleasure to invite Ms. Inger Andersen, Under-Secretary General and the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, to provide her opening remarks. Please, Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, William Samoei Ruto, President of Kenya, it is an honor for us to welcome you here today to the United Nations compound, especially since we know that you are busy planting trees today. Today is a National Tree Planting Day for Kenya. Ambassador Mesa Quedra, INC Chair, and of course my dear colleague, Jyoti Mato Philip, Executive Secretary. To all distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome to Kenya, Karibu, Kenya. Welcome to the home of the United Nations Environment Programme, and to this, the 3rd session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to develop that internationally legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. Colleagues and friends, 18 months ago in this very city, in this very hall, at an emotional moment, the gavel went down at the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly, and we passed that very historic resolution to craft this instrument. There were tears, and there were hugs, and there was joy. Let us recall that moment, because this resolution was hailed as a triumph of the Nairobi spirit, this spirit of cooperation, the spirit of consensus, and yes, the spirit of ambition. I ask that you embrace this very spirit once more in the coming days, because this agreement must be strong, because it must be comprehensive, because it must be ready by 2024. And as you begin, let me remind you of a key point. The resolution that you passed at UNEP 5.2 called for an instrument that is, and I quote, based on a comprehensive approach that addresses the full life cycle of plastic, unquote. Not an instrument that deals with plastic pollution from recycling or waste management alone, the full life cycle. And this means rethinking everything along the chain, from polymer to production, from product to packaging. We need to use fewer virgin materials, less plastic, and no harmful chemicals. We need to ensure that we use and reuse and recycle resources more efficiently and dispose safely of what is left over. This is how we protect human and ecosystem health. This is how we slow climate change. And this is how we create new jobs and sustainable markets and deliver a just transition. So the instrument must eliminate the unnecessary, problematic, and avoidable plastic products, including short-lived and single-use plastics. The instruments must ensure that the redesign of products, including packaging, to use less plastic and be more easily reused, refilled, repaired, and repurposed and recycled repeatedly. And the instrument must eliminate unnecessary single-use products and foresee a switch to non-plastic substitute, alternative plastics, and alternative products that do not create a negative impact. And that includes dealing with microplastics, and harmful chemicals, because we know that over 900 chemicals have been identified in packaging, and 148 of these have been identified as most hazardous. Workers and users are exposed to these chemicals before they even become waste. They've got to go. This deal must also strengthen the systems for reducing, reusing, and refilling and recycling, improve the environmentally sound waste management and disposal, deal with the legacy of plastic pollution that washes up on our shores, and of course, deliver a just transition and new, decent jobs for communities such as waste pickers. Friends, the Chair's zero draft that he has presented to you includes these elements and more. It is a true work of multilateralism. It is now up to you to ensure that together we reach a transformational instrument by backing these elements and putting in place key enablers for the real deal. And that means setting ambitious targets with accelerated timelines, because the agreement will only be as strong as the reduction goals and the list of banned substances and products within it. And that means prioritizing work on the enabling policy environment and legislation, because we all know that legislation enables change. And that means clear incentives, including for the private sector, to innovate on materials, scale up on reuse and refill systems, and participate in extended producer responsibility system. And this means financing, assistance, and international cooperation so that nations with fewer resources, including those that produce plastics, can change track. And that means real funding for R&D solutions. This means following the principles of safe and environmentally sound approaches when redesigning, because replacements for plastics and chemicals cannot be harmful. And that means bringing everyone on board, the governments across sectors, businesses across value chains, public and private institutions, investors, civil society, waste pickers, indigenous peoples, scientific bodies, and the other multilateral environmental agreements. And it means investments in solid waste management infrastructure, that is engineered landfills with leachate collection to prevent groundwater pollution, compacting those landfills, as well as sorting and recycling. And it means ensuring a transition that works for everyone, that is just and leaves no one behind, because the deal won't stick without justice for nations, for communities, and for people, including waste pickers. Friends, one of the most important enablers of all of this is private sector leadership. If industry gets not just behind this deal, but ahead of it by putting its resources and innovation to immediate work, we can turbocharge this transformation. And frankly, it will be an issue of early winners. I ask, therefore, the private sector to understand that this is not just about philanthropy or corporate social responsibility. This is about your future. In the boardroom, as well as in your homes, this instrument is coming. The world is changing, and we all know that as the drive to sustainability gathers pace, the early movers, the early innovators, will be those that succeed. Companies that adopt non-plastic substitute alternatives, etc., and use better plastics now will win the market share. Once they have it, everyone else will be running to catch up. And since we are in Kenya, let me say, let Africa lead the way. African nations like Kenya and Rwanda and many others have led in reducing single-use plastic, have shown that it is entirely possible. For over a decade, this has been in place in a number of countries. African businesses have innovated in spaces like mobile money. We see this here in this country. And Africa is a continent of natural resources that can be used for planet-friendly alternatives and substitutes to plastic. Friends, the coming days will be crucial, and it's in your hands. INC-3 must be a strong next iteration, a strong next iteration of the draft and a mandate for the chair to get ready for the next round of negotiations in Ottawa with that next iteration ready. So I ask that you embrace the Nairobi spirit, that you embrace this beautiful country that we are so proud to call our home, that you are ambitious, that you are innovative, that you are bold, and that you use these negotiations to hone a sharp and incisive instrument so that together we can carve a better future free from plastic pollution. Thank you.
I thank the Executive Director of UNEP for her statement. I would now like to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. William Samoei Ruto, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces of the Republic of Kenya, to provide his opening remarks. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me take this opportunity first on behalf of the people and government of Kenya to welcome all of you to this great city of Nairobi. While you are in Nairobi, you've heard there is the spirit of Nairobi. The spirit of Nairobi is about the spirit of home. Before all you guys went to all manner of places in Europe, America, Australia, Asia, and the rest of Africa, this is the home of humanity. This is where we all began. And so allow me to say, welcome home. I know many of you may have required a visa to get here. That may probably be the last time you will need a visa to come to Kenya, because from next year, none of you will require a visa, because it's not fair. Because it's not fair to ask anybody for a visa when they are going home. It is important. Let me begin, Madam Executive Director, Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, distinguished chair of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastic Pollution, Ambassador Meza Guerda, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is not always common for the globe to speak in unison or act in urgency on an issue, especially when it is of an environmental nature. But the threat of plastics to our planet, our health, and our future is of such magnitude that it requires all of us, and I mean all of us, the Global South and the Global North, to develop and execute a global instrument that will help us to neutralize the threat of plastic pollution in our world. The numbers on plastic pollution explain the necessity of working together with tremendous purpose and urgency. Every year, more than 400 million tons of plastic waste are produced globally. Of this, 23 million tons find their way into rivers, lakes, and oceans, and less than 10% is recycled. Across the world, 46% of plastic waste is landfilled, 22% is mismanaged and becomes litter, while 17% is incinerated. If we hold our laurels and do nothing, we will produce more than 1 billion tons of plastic by 2060. This kind of polluting our environment is unacceptable and is essentially an existential threat to life, to humanity, and to everything in between. This is the time to stop this, and you are the negotiators who will make this happen. On behalf of the government and people of Kenya, I welcome all of you to our country and to this integral session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. Kenya is delighted to host this session, particularly because it was here in Nairobi that humanity spoke in one voice at the United Nations Environmental Assembly 5.2, when 170 nations agreed to launch negotiations towards a globally binding instrument. The scope of the instrument was supposed to clearly reflect the requirement of Resolution 514 of the United Nations Environmental Assembly, including ending plastic pollution across the full cycle of all plastics and addressing its effects on human health and the environment, and especially the marine environment. The committee was tasked to draft at least 3 things. Number 1, a global instrument that promotes sustainable product design and eliminates the most harmful and high-risk plastic categories, including problematic polymers, chemicals of concern, products and applications, and bring overall plastic production to sustainable levels. Number 2, ensures the need to enshrine sustainable production and consumption patterns and environmentally sound management of plastic waste, which also addresses existing plastic pollution. And number 3, to support the application of the Rio Principle, including the polluter pays and precautionary principles, the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, and emphasizes the importance of operationalizing those principles throughout the provision of the instrument. I want to commend the committee for the work you have already accomplished in your first and second sessions. I believe I speak for many across the world when I say I am encouraged and confident that you will deliver a global instrument on time and lead a monumental shift in our relationship with the planet and with each other. The global community is waiting with great anticipation for the instrument that you will develop to chart a global plan for tracking plastic pollution. This anticipation is heightened by the zero draft, and it is the shared belief of many that this third session presents an opportunity for you, distinguished delegates, to convert the draft into a plan. The zero draft serves as a rallying call for global collective action for our planet through various interventions such as the reduction of plastic produced, elimination of problematic and short-lived plastics, investments in solid waste management policies, and a just transition by integrating workers, especially in the informal settings, to ensure that no one is left behind in the shift from a linear to a circular model of plastic life cycle management. The ambition for the zero draft is a welcome signal that the world is one step closer to ending plastic pollution, one of the biggest contributors to the triple planetary crisis. I commend the committee for your inclusive approach and incorporating the views of diverse stakeholders. This draft is a product of true environmental multilateralism. I would like to affirm Kenya's commitment to ending plastic pollution. We demonstrated this commitment with a ban on the manufacture and use of polythene bags in 2017, followed closely in 2020 with a ban on single-use plastics in protected areas such as national parks, forests, and beaches. Further, in July 2022, Kenya enacted the Sustainable Waste Management Act, which made our country the first in the world to subject all products, including plastics, to extended producer responsibility. We know this is not enough, and we are ready to play our part in the elimination of plastic pollution. Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai, a daughter of our own soil, taught us the principle of the hummingbird, which is essentially beginning to do the work bit by bit until it is done. I thank the African Ministerial Conference on Environment for proposing that the UNEP headquarters in Nairobi be the host of the Secretariat for the Plastic Convention. The chairman of Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee in the synthesis paper to be considered at this meeting has also seconded this idea. I humbly ask members, states, to support this proposal to host the Secretariat at UNEP headquarters here in Nairobi. And I'm saying this because we have been very generous. Many of the environment treaties that have been agreed upon in the past have gone to other destinations, which is something we value. But because UNEP today has grown and we need some grandchildren here, and one of them is going to be this treaty once it's agreed upon. This will strengthen UNEP, one of the few United Nations agencies headquartered in the Global South. Dealing with plastic pollution is central to making progress on climate change. Plastics could account for up to 19% of greenhouse gas emissions allowed under a 1.5 degrees centigrade by 2040. It is now time for investors, multinational corporations, and technology companies to shift strategic investment to reduce their plastic waste footprint. We call upon producers and innovators to rethink plastic products and packaging to reflect the principles of reuse, refill, repair, and repurpose for exploring alternative options such as non-plastic substitutes, alternative plastics, and plastic products that do not have negative environmental, health, and social impacts. I invite innovators to come and invest in Africa because the continent has natural resources that can be used for planet-friendly alternatives. This is an opportunity for African plastic alternative industries to become market leaders and drive economic growth and transformation on our continent, create jobs, create opportunities, unleash the huge potential that exists in our continent. Innovation has moved humanity forward for centuries, helping people overcome numerous threats and challenges. The elimination of plastic pollution is a threat that demands innovation. This is the reality and challenge that industry and private sector must accept and look for opportunities in other alternatives. The world is in need of alternatives and ways of making plastics circular. This calls for investment in mechanisms to make technology transfer and transformation easy and possible. As we begin this third session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, I urge all the negotiators to recall that 2024 is only 6 weeks away and only 2 other meetings to go. I reiterate my confidence in your ability to get this done, to repay the faith humanity has placed on you to deliver this moment in history, to chart a path forward for the planet and people against one of the biggest threats we have ever faced. To deal with plastic pollution, humanity must change. We must change the way we consume, the way we produce, and how we dispose our waste. This is the reality of our world. Change is inevitable. This treaty, this instrument that we are working on is the first domino in this change. Let us bring it home, because in any case you are at home. Let the change begin. Thank you very much. God bless you. And before I conclude, this is not how I always dress. I sometimes do better. But today, as was said by Madam Anderson here, we have a special working day. We are all working but planting trees in Kenya. It is not a holiday as such. It is a special working day. And we are committed that today we are going to plant 100 million trees in Kenya today. And it is because we have made a commitment that we are going to plant 15 billion trees in the next 10 years. And this is because we believe in the environment, and that is why UNEP is here in Nairobi. And I don't know whether you read clearly your invitation letters. There was a small print somewhere, you might want to check, that said that before you leave Nairobi, you must plant a tree. And I have issued I have issued very firm instructions that nobody leaves the airport until they have planted their tree. So please plant your tree. And I will ask you to do one more thing. When you plant that tree, because we need to look after it when you leave, please download either in the Apple Store or in Android an app. It's called Jaza Miti. Jaza Miti, let me give you the word, J-A-Z-A, that is Jaza, and then Miti, M-I-T-I. Download, take a picture, it will go into our website, we will know where the tree is, and we will look after it when you have planted. Because that app will enable us to know the geolocation of the tree you have planted. So I am making that request to all of us who are here. We will be very proud if you can join our tree planting effort. The Ministry of Environment has made all the tree seedlings for each one of you available in this compound. And it is also free. So let me say thank you very much. I wish you well, and we look forward to a good product. God bless you.
I thank the President of the Republic of Kenya for his statement. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, with this, I would like to close this opening segment. So please allow a 5-minute break for our dignitaries to leave the podium. Delegates, please remain seated. Thank you. Please, we will start in a minute. Would you take your seat, please? Distinguished delegates, we have to bear in mind that we only have 2 more sessions after INC-3 with limited time to deliver on our mandate, so we need to be very cautious of time and discipline to use these 7 days wisely. For the same reason, and as we have done at our second session, to allow us to move swiftly into the substance of the negotiations, we will not be hearing general statements from the floor in this opening segment. There will be an opportunity for delegates to provide focus statements under agenda item 4, which I will highlight again when outlining the suggested organization of work under agenda item 3C. So, before we proceed to the next agenda item, I would like to invite the Secretariat to provide some logistical remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Thank you. Distinguished delegates, as you have been informed, only the blue-green badges marked INC-3 plenary will grant you access to this plenary floor. This is due to the very large number of delegates and the space available in this room. These passes are distributed per delegation at the registration center. Member state delegations have received a maximum of 4 passes. Observers from UN entities and intergovernmental organizations have received a maximum of 2 passes, and observers from non-governmental organizations have received 1 pass per organization. Delegates may also follow plenary proceedings projected on the screen in conference room 1, that is located just opposite this room, or via the live stream on UN Web TV in all 6 official languages. The links to access the live stream are available on the INC-3 website. To request the floor, if you are sitting on the left side of the microphone, please press A button. If you are sitting on the right side of the microphone, press B to speak. Press the button only once, and the light will turn red. Do not press the button a second time, otherwise you will be removed from the queue. When the chair gives you the floor, the technician will activate the microphone and the light will turn green, and then you can start speaking. Regarding statements, and as outlined in the chair's scenario note, the time limit for statements made on behalf of group of members will be 5 minutes and 3 minutes for statements delivered in national capacity. As per usual practice, observers may take the floor after interventions from members, time permitting. Statements from observers will be limited to 2 minutes each. A timer will be embedded in and projected image. Delegates are requested to keep within the assigned time when taking the floor and to speak clearly and slowly to facilitate the work of the interpreters. For statements in plenary, delegates are kindly requested to submit their statements via email to UNEP n-incplastic.statements@un.org in Word or PDF formats. Please indicate the agenda item and your country or organization in the file name and on the first page of the document. The Secretariat has also put in place a section on the INC website where any written statements and submissions from members will be posted. You are kindly invited to send the submissions to the same email address I have just mentioned. It greatly facilitates the work of the interpreters if you can submit your statements in advance of delivery. Statements will be posted on the INC website after delivered. Guidance on statements with this information and the email address were circulated via email on Friday, 10 November. Please be reminded that observer interventions will be at the discretion of the chair, time permitting. Seating for observers in plenary will be available on first-come, first-served basis. Therefore, observers are kindly requested to coordinate amongst themselves so that those who would like to speak are given priority to access the plenary floor and deliver their statement. We have put in place a queuing system for observers to be able to identify the name of your organization, as the room system does not allow for that. Therefore, in the afternoon plenary session, at every observer seat with microphone, you will find a QR code with the instructions for use. We will have a dedicated staff member in the room in the case observers have questions or need assistance with this system. All meeting documents are available on the INC webpage as well. The Secretariat has also put in place a section on the website where the submissions will be posted. A live daily calendar is accessible on the website, and delegates are also invited to consult the screens in the venue with the latest updates to the schedule. Regional and political groups have the opportunity to hold their daily meetings between 8 and 10 a.m. each day. Room numbers are provided on the screens in the venue. Please do inform the Secretariat at least 2 hours in advance via email should you require room for any additional time. There is a dedicated Wi-Fi network for our meeting entitled INC-3. The password has been available on signs around the venue. A few words about our compound here in Nairobi. The entrance is open daily from 7:30 a.m. until 8 p.m. Delegates may remain on the premises as late as necessary. However, entry into the venue will not be allowed after 8 p.m. Exit after this time, after 8 p.m., will be via the main gate. The cafeteria, the main cafeteria that you find upstairs, will operate until 9 p.m. each day, and the delegates' lounge that you find across this courtyard will remain open until 11 p.m. Thematic side events will be held from Tuesday to Friday from 1:30 p.m. to 2:45. The rooms will be announced on the screens. I am also pleased to inform you that in preparation for INC-4, the Government of Canada has kindly offered to host a booth outside Conference Room 1. A representative from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada will be at the booth from tomorrow until Thursday, 16th of November, from 1 to 3 p.m. to answer any questions you may have regarding the visa application process to Canada. We encourage you to visit the booth in case you have any questions. All INC-3 delegates have been granted access to the UN Commissary, which is a duty-free shop within the complex. For sponsored delegates, the schedule for payment of DSA is available on the screens, and further information on all these practical aspects and logistics is also available in the information note to participants that is online. The Secretariat has made great efforts to eliminate avoidable plastics at this meeting, and we call on all of you as delegates to also do your part. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the Secretariat for this information. This concludes our consideration of Agenda Item 1. So, distinguished delegates, we shall now move on to consider Sub-Item 3B on the adoption of the agenda for this session. The provisional agenda for this session is contained in document UNEP/PP/INC-3/1. Delegates will recall that at its last session, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee agreed to forward the provisional agenda to this session. The annotations to the provisional agenda are contained in document UNEP/PP/INC-3/1/add1. Before we adopt the agenda, I would like to remind members that I intend to take up Agenda Item 5 on other matters during the plenary meeting on Sunday, 19 November. Should any member wish to raise any other matters under that item, I invite you to alert me during the course of the week. Distinguished delegates, may I propose that the committee adopts the provisional agenda as contained in document UNEP/PP/INC-3/1? I see no objection. It is so decided. The committee has thus concluded its consideration of agenda item 3B. May I conclude that this is adopted? You will recall that at its first session, I will consider now sub-item 3A on the adoption of the rules of procedure. You will recall that at its first session held in Punta del Este, the committee agreed to defer the adoption of the draft rules of procedure until its second session. The committee also agreed that the draft rules of procedure, as contained in document UNEP/PP/INC-3/3, would apply to its work on a provisional basis until their adoption, with the exception of the rule in brackets. At the second session, the committee decided to adopt the following interpretative statement relating to Rule 38, paragraph 1 of the draft rules of procedure. And I quote, "The Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee understands that based on discussion on the draft rules of procedure for the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, there are different views among Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee members on Rule 38, paragraph 1, and its reflection in the report of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on the work of its first session. Therefore, the provisional application of Rule 38, paragraph 1 of the draft rules of procedure has been a subject of debate. In the event that Rule 38, paragraph 1 is invoked before the rules are formally adopted, members will recall this lack of agreement." End of quote. I wish to point out that this interpretative statement has also been included in the note by the Secretariat accompanying the draft rules of procedure in document UNEP/PP/INC-3/3. I have reached out to a number of delegations in the intersessional period to consult on this issue. In light of the differing views, it appears that more time is needed to resolve this matter. I will continue to hold consultations with delegations and propose that my successor continues to consult on this important issue during the intersessional period with a view to resolving this matter at our subsequent sessions. I wish to make it clear to members that I have no intention for us to resort to the use of the draft Rule 38, paragraph 1. I believe that we have a lot of work to get through this week, and I am confident that we can achieve this in a spirit of cooperation and consensus. I count on the support of all of you to make us work cohesively and cooperatively to make this session as effective as possible. With that in mind, as I recall at the second session of the committee, the draft rules of procedure will continue to apply to the work of the committee on a provisional basis, as decided at its first session, and taking into account also the interpretative statement adopted by the committee at its second session. If it's agreeable, the committee has that concluded its consideration of item 3A. I have a request for the floor. I give the floor to India.
Thank you, Chair. At the outset, we would like to thank the Government of Kenya for their warm hospitality in welcoming the delegates for the third meeting of INC. We would also like to thank the INC Chair, INC Secretariat, and UNEP for organization of this meeting. India has always been committed to the principle of consensus in decision-making in respect of substantive matters under multilateral environmental agreements, as this reiterates collective decision-making and reflects shared responsibilities and commitment. At the outset, our delegation would like to reiterate that all the decisions on substantive issues shall be taken by consensus and that Rule 38(1) shall not be invoked till the final adoption of rules of procedure by INC. We may recall that INC-2 had spent a substantial time on adopting the interpretative statement in this regard. In this regard, our delegation would like to seek assurance from INC Chair that the Rule 38(1) shall not be invoked during INC-3 meeting in the spirit of moving ahead with the deliberations on substantive issues. We would like to reiterate that consensus-based decision-making is indispensable to ensure fairness, equity, inclusiveness, shared responsibility, and collective commitments and actions in all multilateral process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished delegate of India. As I have already mentioned, I want to emphasize that I am very committed to holding to our discussions in the spirit of cooperation and consensus, and count on all of us to demonstrate this spirit by conducting the session without resorting to Rule 38, Paragraph 1. I see the request from Liberia. I give the floor to the distinguished delegate of Liberia.
Sorry, Chair, it was an error.
Thank you. So with that, the committee has thus concluded this stage of consideration of the item. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to consider Agenda Item 3C on the organization of work. Before proceeding further, I would like to highlight that in addition to the scenario note program contained in document UNEP/PP/INC3/2, a proposed program has been made available on the website. Further, I prepared a reflection note that was made available ahead of our meeting that outlined my proposed approach for the session. Allow me now to provide some more information. Under Agenda Item 4, entitled Preparation of an International Legally Binding Instrument on Plastic Pollution, including in the marine environment, I will introduce the zero draft contained in document UNEP/PP/INC3/4 and ask the Secretariat to provide some additional information on the document. Following this, I will invite co-facilitators of the preparatory meeting mandated by the committee at its second session to present a summary of the discussions of that meeting. Their more detailed written summary has also been made available on the meeting website. Under this agenda item, I will be inviting groups of members, individual member delegations, and observers to provide general remarks on the issues addressed in document UNEP/PP/INC3/4 and, where relevant, on the issues discussed at the preparatory meeting. Following this general round of discussions, as per my scenario note, I will propose to establish contact groups under Agenda Item 4. Before the contact groups are formally established and only after hearing your views, we will briefly suspend plenary so that I can review and finalize the mandate and guidance for the contact groups based on what I have heard. I will also provide some suggestions on how to best harness the interlinkages between the work of the contact groups during our discussions on Item 4. I propose that statements be limited to 5 minutes each for a statement made on behalf of a group of members, 3 minutes each for a statement by representative of individual members, and time permitting, observers will be able to deliver statements for 2 minutes each. Where possible, the latter remarks should be delivered on behalf of constituencies. I hope this approach is acceptable to you all. So, it is so decided. I see Iran.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I wish to take this opportunity to read a statement on behalf of the like-minded group, including my own, on Agenda Item 4. As we progress in our negotiations...
Excuse me, may I repeat that we are not yet in Agenda Item 4.
Oh, sorry.
We were in the organization, and I just announced how we are going to proceed, so there will be...
Sorry, I will keep it for later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I see at this time no objections. It's adopted this procedure, and we will discuss then in Agenda Item 4 in more detail the proposal of contact groups. The next point is Estonia. We will have first, before entering the other point, we have been informed, I would like to inform the floor, that we have been informed by the government of Estonia on Friday, 10 November, that a vice chair from the Eastern European states, Mr. Kaupo Hainma of Estonia, has resigned from his position as vice chair of the committee. So, in accordance to Rule 13 of the draft rules of procedure being applied to the work of the committee on a provisional basis, if a vice chair resigns, a new vice chair shall be elected for the unexpired term, with due regard to Rule 9, Paragraph 2. Rule 9, Paragraph 2 stipulates that the committee shall have due regard to the principle of equitable geographical representation and gender balance in the election of officers. The rule also stipulates that each of the 5 United Nations regional groups shall be represented by 2 members of the Bureau, and 1 Bureau member shall represent the small island development states. Therefore, with the resignation of the Bureau member representing the group of Eastern European states, a vice chair shall be elected for the remainder of the term from the regional group of Eastern European states. So I take note of the resignation of the Vice Chair from Estonia, and I invite the group of Eastern European states to undertake the necessary consultation on a single candidate for the one vacant seat for the region. I invite the group to communicate to me the information on the nomination by Thursday, 16 November 2023. As presented in my scenario note for this session, I propose to take up agenda item 2 on the election of officers during the plenary on Sunday, 19 November, to address the matters of the change of the chair. I propose to also address the replacement of the vice chair from the group of Eastern European states at the plenary meeting, which would also provide ample time for the group to conduct its internal consultation on the nomination for the vacant seat. So I hope this is acceptable. In our plenary on Saturday, 18 November, we will consider agenda item 3D on dates and venue of subsequent sessions of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee and agenda item 3E on the provisional agenda of our 4th session. In plenary, on Sunday, 19 November, we will also consider agenda item 5 on other matters, agenda item 6 on the adoption of the report of the session, and finally, agenda item 7 on the closing of the session. I take that we can proceed with our work on this basis. I see no objection. It is so decided. So now the committee has concluded its consideration of agenda item 3. Distinguished delegates, we have now reached the core substantive item of our process. The committee will now consider agenda item 4 on the preparation of an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. Under this item, the committee has before it document UNEP/PP/INC-3/4 entitled Zero Draft Text of the International Legally Binding Instrument on Plastic Pollution, including in the marine environment. As you know, the Zero Draft Text aims at facilitating and supporting the work of our committee towards the development of an international legally binding instrument. It reflects the objective and mandate of UNEA Resolution 514 and tries to capture the range of views expressed at the committee's first and second sessions, including through the use of options, while ensuring coherence, logic, and readability of the text. You may recall that the second session of the committee discussions on some issues were more extensive than on others, a little more general, and you may have noticed that the level of detail on the options outlined in the Zero Draft Text somewhat reflect this. With this in mind, I encourage delegates to use this time here in Nairobi to fill in any gaps and improve on the draft text. I would like to remind delegates that the zero draft is not intended to prejudge the committee's decision on the content or structure of the future instrument. Throughout its work, the committee may wish to identify some convergence on options or on removal of options, as well as identify gaps and ideas on how to address them. While the text does not specifically outline a non-text option, which means not having a specific provision in the text, such options is of course always available for any of the provisions. In addition to the zero draft, the committee also has before it document UNEP/PP/INC-3/INF/1 entitled Synthesis Report of the Submissions Received on Elements Not Discussed at the Second Session, such as principles and scope of the instrument. This document was prepared by the Secretariat in consultation with myself to help inform the discussions during the preparatory meeting held on 11 November. The synthesis report is not a negotiating document, but intended to help everyone to navigate the various submissions that have been received by 15 September. I believe it can be a useful way to help delegates structure their thinking on these issues, understand each other's point of views, and start putting forward ideas so that they can be included in the next iteration of the draft text of the instrument. I would now kindly ask the Secretariat to provide some additional information on these documents. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Secretariat will provide some additional information on the zero draft text document 3/4 to highlight how the Chair has developed and structured the document to assist you in navigating it. At its second session, the committee requested the Chair to prepare the zero draft text with the support of the Secretariat. The committee further decided that the preparation of this text should be guided by the views expressed at the committee's first and second sessions, and that the full range of views could be indicated through options in the zero draft. A Chair's explanatory note on page 3 of the document explains the structure and logic behind the document, the use of the footnotes, and many other important considerations. Part 1 of the zero draft covers the objectives of the instrument and leaves placeholders as requested at INC-2 for elements that members may wish to include but were not discussed at the second session. The list of elements in Part 1 is indicative and includes placeholders for preamble, definitions, principles, and scope. It does not prejudge the way members may wish to address or structure them. Part 2 of the zero draft contains a variety of elements which are broadly structured around the life cycle of plastics and plastic products with the aim of addressing plastic pollution. Collectively, they aim to promote the sustainable production and consumption of plastics through, amongst other things, product design and environmentally sound waste management, including through resource efficiency and circular economy approaches. Parts 3 and 4 outline different options of measures aimed at collectively addressing the implementation of the instrument. Parts 5 and 6 contain placeholders for potential institutional arrangements and possible final provisions, respectively. Finally, in the appendix, you will find possible annexes to the instrument. Allow me to highlight a few points about the overall approach of the zero draft, which is also highlighted in the Chair's explanatory note on page 3. Placeholders have been used to identify elements that have not yet been subject to detailed discussion by members. These are only indicative and will need further elaboration. The order of headings in the zero draft is not fixed and does not imply any prioritization. The document contains draft text reflecting possible ways to address issues based on views expressed by members. The range of views have been expressed through options, In some cases, this can include provisions common to several options. The zero draft also includes placeholders for possible annexes as relevant. The term instrument and governing body are only indicative terms without prejudice as to how the final designation is decided by the committee. Where appropriate, the zero draft text includes footnotes that provide additional background information. Such notes and comments are not intended to be part of the language of the zero draft to be negotiated, but only provide additional information. Finally, please note that due to the frequency of INC sessions and to ensure that the committee receives documents on time, we have called upon external translation services for the zero draft. Given that these translations were not prepared by the UN translation services, should any translation issue be identified, these can be brought to the attention of the Secretariat at our email address, unep-incplastic.secretariat@un.org. The Secretariat will look into releasing a technical revision to the document following the session as needed. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank the Secretariat. I would like at this time to express my gratitude to my team and the INC Secretariat staff for supporting me in preparing the zero draft. As I noted, I have prepared this document guided by the views expressed by members at the first and second sessions of the committee, as well as the submissions ahead of the second session. The way it is structured should enable us to proceed systematically through each subject area to be covered in the instrument. But before I open the floor for statements, I would invite the co-facilitators of the preparatory meeting, Ms. Marine Collignon of France and Mr. Dani Ragdiansyah of Indonesia, to provide a summary of the discussions at that meeting. The co-facilitator's summary has also been uploaded to the meeting website. I invite Ms. Collignon, Mr. Ragdiansyah, you have the floor. I give the floor to France. Ms. Collignon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We are pleased to report, as requested, on the outcome of the preparatory day mandated by INC-2 and held on 11 November. Let me first express, on behalf of both, our appreciation to you, Chair, for the confidence you placed in us in entrusting us with the facilitation of this meeting. We would like to thank also all the participants for their supportive and constructive engagement. The meeting was conducted in person in 2 plenary meetings. As anticipated, 2 substantive agenda items were considered. First, we considered the element addressed in the synthesis report on the submissions received on element not discussed at the second session of the INC. Under this agenda item, 2 rounds of discussion took place. A first round on preamble, definition, scope, and principles, and the second round on institutional arrangements and final provisions. As reflected in our written summary, on all these elements, delegates engaged in a very constructive and rich exchange of views that we hope can pave the way for a fruitful consideration of these issues by the committee during the session. The second substantive agenda item considered was intersessional work. Here too, the initial exchange of views helped to clarify the position and priorities of members with respect to possible intersessional work that could be undertaken to support the committee's work and its potential modalities. This discussion also reflected in our summary. We presented our oral summary of the discussion at the end of the meeting. And in this opportunity, Mr. Chair, my co-facilitator and I will take turn to read the final summary. And I would like to give the floor to my co-facilitator.
Thank you very much. We understand that the document has not yet been uploaded, and that's why we will read it. But just to let you know that the document will be updated by the beginning of the afternoon and also will be in all 6 languages of the UN. Alors, regarding the preamble, on the purpose of the preamble, references were made to the preamble recalling the history, providing the context and setting the tone for the instrument. Some members referred to the preamble as not being legally binding. Some also stressed the importance of having a short preamble. On the content of the preamble, a number of concepts, approaches, and principles were raised by delegation for possible inclusion in the preamble or a separate section. We outline some of these here and others later in the document without prejudice to whether and where the INC may decide they should be reflected. Members asked to refer to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals, and to plastic pollution as a global concern and the urgent need for a global response. Reference was made to other multilateral environmental agreements, including the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and relevant regional agreements. Many members emphasized the need to recall UNEA Resolution 5/14 and earlier resolutions. Several members pointed out the need to acknowledge the different circumstances of different states, including the special needs and circumstances of developing states, and the particular needs of small island developing states. Many members called for a reference to a human rights-based approach, the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, the right to health, and the right of indigenous peoples and local communities. References to the eradication of poverty, the importance of plastic for sustainable development, the sustainable management of plastic, and the circularity approach were also called for. Some members expressed the view that the relationship between climate, biodiversity, and pollution, and the importance of different sources of knowledge, including indigenous and local knowledge, should also be contained in the preamble. Finally, some members suggested that the preamble should be drafted only when the more substantive elements of the instrument have been developed.
With regard to definitions, many members referred to the need to include existing internationally agreed definitions, those endorsed in other multilateral environmental agreements or MEAs or processes, or those contained in documents UNEP/PP/INC1/6 and UNEP/PP/INC1/7 could be relied on or used as a starting point while acknowledging that some specific terms may need to be adapted for the purposes of the instrument. It was suggested that clear agreed definitions of key terms could provide clarity for the negotiation and avoid ambiguity for the operation and the implementation of the instrument. A number of members suggested to focus on the definition of terms used in the instrument that are critical to understanding and implementing the obligations. It was also suggested that the need for specific defined terms should be determined by the content of the substantive provisions of the instrument. Some members noted that technical terms specific to plastic needed to be defined. These included, among others, plastics, polymers, the distinction between primary and secondary polymers, the life cycle of plastic, problematic plastic product, and chemicals of concern. Different views were raised as to when the discussion on definition should take place. Some considered that discussions on substantive provisions of the instrument should take place before technical discussion on definitions for inclusion in the text of the instrument. Others considered that discussions on definition could also take place in parallel to negotiations on substantive provisions. Some suggested that definitions should be agreed on after reaching agreement on scope and principles. Some suggested that technical work on key technical terms could take place during the intersessional period.
Regarding principles, different views were expressed as to where principles should be referred to in the instrument, such as in the preamble, in a separate article of the instrument, or reflected in the operative provision of the instrument. Some members highlighted that in addition to reflecting principles in the instrument, it was equally important to operationalize them through its other provisions. Some members considered that agreed principle could help guide the development and interpretation of the provision on the instrument. For some members, principles should be discussed once there is more clarity on other parts of the text, including core obligations. There were different views on how principles should be referred to and what principles fell within the mandate of the committee. Many members referred to the principles set out in the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, in general, or with reference to specific principles. The following principles were referred to in no particular order of priority. Common but differentiated responsibilities, the polluter pays principle, the precautionary approach, the prevention principle, sovereignty over the use of natural resources, just transition, the protection of vulnerable communities, shared responsibility, intergenerational equity, non-regression, ecosystem approach, extended producer responsibility, transparency, inclusiveness, bottom-up approach, a gender perspective, general principle related to marine pollution, circular economy, non-discrimination, based available science, local and indigenous knowledge, access to information and transparency, equity, sustained economic development, trade, promotion of cooperation at regional and international level, and the 3 R's of the waste management.
With regard to scope, many members expressed the view that UNEA Resolution 514 provides the basis for the scope of the future agreement, i.e. that the scope should be on long-term elimination of plastic pollution based on a comprehensive approach that addresses the full life cycle of plastic. Some members highlighted the relevance of additional specific elements for inclusion in the scope of the instrument, including with reference to the Sustainable Development Goals. Some members indicated that the life cycle of plastic should be further defined. Different views were expressed on the extent to which raw material extraction and polymer production should form part of the scope of the instrument. Reference was also made to the need to cover in the scope the type of plastics to be addressed by the instrument, including micro and nanoplastics, and to all types of plastics irrespective of their origin. Some members highlighted that the focus should be on the elimination of plastic pollution rather than plastic. Some members noted that the scope of the instrument should be broad enough to cover plastic pollution affecting all ecosystems, including releases in air, water, and soil, and that different geographical specificities, including terrestrial and marine and coastal environment, freshwater and mountain areas should be taken into account. Some members noted that the scope of the instrument should not overlap with that of other MEAs. Some were of the view that the instrument should not address trade, while others indicated that provisions should promote trade development rather than trade restrictions, and should be in full conformity with the World Trade Organizations. Different views were expressed with respect to the possible need for exemptions, for example, for national security issues and health emergencies. The transboundary nature of plastic pollution was highlighted by many, and some members were of the view that the instrument should apply both to areas within national jurisdiction and spaces and territories not falling under the sovereignty of states. It was further suggested that the instrument should cover activities within areas where a party exercises its jurisdiction of control. Some members considered that a provision of scope was needed. Other members were all of the view that this is not mandated by Resolution 514 and or that such a provision was not needed. Observers were given the opportunity to express their views. In that context, the importance of international labor convention and standards, the need for coherence and treaty convergence to ensure uniformity in commitments, the importance of referring to the special situation of vulnerable countries, and the need for finance in the preamble of the instrument, and the essential role of local and subnational government were noted. It was also suggested that principles of human rights and environmental law should be reflected in the instrument.
Now moving to the institutional arrangement. it was suggested that arrangement in existing MEAs, including under the Minamata, Basel, and Stockholm Conventions, provide a basis for the development of provision on institutional arrangement, including with respect to the establishment of a governing body, a secretariat, or final provision. However, while other MEAs can be a source of inspiration, institutional arrangement would need to be tailored to the specific needs of the future instrument.
With regard to the governing body, support was expressed for the establishment of one governing body, such as a conference of the parties, with functions to be defined in the agreement, adapted to the needs of the instrument. Reference was made in this respect to the functions identified in paragraph 58 of the synthesis report. There was a general support for the governing body being able to adopt its own rules of procedure, with some highlighting that decision-making by the governing body should be by consensus and only allow for voting on non-substantive issues. The need to ensure that the governing body meets regularly was noted.
Regarding subsidiary bodies, support was expressed for the establishment of one or more subsidiary bodies to provide support on specific aspects, to be established either by the governing body or by the instrument itself, on an ad hoc or permanent basis. The need for flexibility and capacity to adapt to changing needs was noted. It was also suggested that the subsidiary body should be member-driven. It was cautioned that the establishment of too many bodies should be avoided. Many members supported the establishment of a subsidiary body for scientific and technical matters to guide decision by the governing body in light of the importance of science to this instrument. Some noted that such body could also address economic and social aspects. Some members called for the inclusion of local and indigenous knowledge and for subsidiary body to be balanced in terms of region, gender, and technical expertise. The importance of meaningful participation of developing countries, including small and vulnerable island states, in subsidiary bodies was highlighted. Different modalities for such body were identified, including scientific, technical, and economic panels or panels of qualified experts that could be called upon to provide timely information and assessments. It was further noted that subsidiary bodies should take into account subsidiary bodies under other MEAs and other scientific bodies to avoid overlap.
Excuse me, I will recommend to read a little bit slower for interpreters to follow you. Thank you very much.
Bien sûr. Some members supported the monitoring. Did I say that already? No. I'm here. Yeah. Yes. Some members supported the monitoring and assessment of socio-economic aspects and of financial flows to developing countries. Several members supported the establishment of a robust financial body and of a dedicated fund under the instrument to provide adequate and predictable financial support to developing countries. Several countries emphasized the need for subsidiary bodies to facilitate capacity building and technology transfer. Reference was also made to the need for an implementation and compliance mechanism, as well as to monitor progress, to be further elaborated when substantive provisions were more clearly defined. Transparency and a facilitative nature of the compliance body were called for. The view was also expressed that compliance issues should be left for national assessment. It was suggested that participation of other stakeholders could be decided by the governing body. Support was also expressed for the establishment of a multi-stakeholder agenda. One observer highlighted the importance of defining modalities for engagement with independent scientists, including in the INC process itself.
With regard to the Secretariat, support was expressed for the establishment of a Secretariat, including with functions as described in paragraph 85 of the synthesis report. It was suggested that arrangements under existing MEAs, including the Minamata and Stockholm Conventions, provided an adequate model for the development of relevant provisions. It was also suggested that the location of the Secretariat should be for the governing body to determine. On the final provisions, several delegates identified the Stockholm and Minamata Conventions as well as the elements reflected in the document UNEP/PP/INC-1/8 as possible starting points for the development of final provisions. It was also suggested that such final provisions should be reviewed after the development of substantive provisions. On dispute settlement, support was expressed for equity and focusing on dispute resolution through negotiation. A group of members highlighted that the establishment of a court of environmental issues would be beyond the mandate of the instrument. Some members supported the development of provisions on annexes and provisions for their amendment, while others considered that the need for such provisions should be assessed in light of the development of the substantive provisions. On amendment to the instrument itself, some delegates emphasized that amendments should be able to be proposed based on science. It was also suggested by some that consideration of amendments should also be guided by the precautionary approach. It was suggested that it would be premature to debate entry into force, but it should be a simple process. Some delegates also expressed concern that it was too soon to negotiate on reservations and withdrawal. Some noted the importance of consistency with the Vienna Convention on the law of treaties in this regard. Support was expressed for provisions on relation with other MEAs to avoid duplication. It was finally suggested that while non-party reference could be appropriate, that they should not impose requirement on them.
And this is the last part. Regarding intersessional work, the Secretariat presented some general indication regarding the potential timing and modalities for any potential intersessional work that could be mandated by the INC in light of the overall time frame of the INC process. Several members requested additional time to consider the presentation made by the Secretariat to allow for a thorough discussion on intersessional work. Some felt the discussion was premature and requested that this subject be revisited during INC-3. Intersessional work was broadly supported, with member states deeming it essential to make the most of the time between INC meetings, beginning with the intersessional period between the committee's third and fourth meetings. This work could focus on technical aspects relating to the convention and should not prejudge its content, although the possibility of working on the draft of the instrument to advance the text was raised. A mandate for the chair to develop the first draft of the future instrument was also raised by some members. Most members converged on the importance of targeted discussions on scientific and technical aspects of the future instrument. Many members supported the notion of selecting priorities across the life cycle of plastics. Such work could include inter alia aspects such as chemicals of concern, avoidable and problematic plastics, design for circularity and eco-conception. Intersessional work on polymers of concern was raised as a priority by many members, although some deemed such work to be beyond the scope of the instrument. Most members also converged on the importance of targeted discussions on means of implementation and mobilization of financial resources. The need to acknowledge the different starting points, capabilities, and resources of countries, in particular developing countries, and the need to align commitment to financing were noted. Preparation of a study on current financial flows to address plastic pollution, determination of funding gaps, and possible establishment of a subsidiary body on financial resources were raised as potential areas for action. Members supported looking to existing financial mechanisms, an independent mechanism, and creation of new innovative approaches to resource mobilization. The inclusion of capacity building and technical assistance in the discussion was also emphasized by some members. In terms of modalities, there was support by numerous members for convening expert groups. Some favored small expert groups, with regions being invited to nominate members to maximize efficiency of the work, while others favored a wider representation in intersessional work. All agreed that such group should ensure an inclusive, balanced, and transparent approach. Lastly, an observer coalition underscored its readiness to support any intersessional work with solid scientific knowledge and emphasize the importance of remaining mindful of conflict of interest. So this is the end of the report that was read at the end of the preparatory meeting, and I'm happy to let you know that it is now posted on the website in English and will be posted in all the UN languages by the beginning of the afternoon. We very much hope that the exchanges that took place at this meeting will pave the way for continued fruitful discussion and facilitate progress this week on all of these issues. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
I thank very much both co-facilitators for this informative summary and also for your conducting in a very positive way this preparatory meeting on Saturday. I think this will enable us to start working on identifying the issues to fill in areas that are currently only on placeholders. I would now like to invite the committee to provide general views on the issues addressed in the zero draft and were relevant on any additional issues, including those related to the summary report presented by co-facilitators of the preparatory meeting. Since our time is limited, please I hope you can keep your statement short and focused. More specific or technical statements will be most useful and informative in the contact groups. As I mentioned earlier, I am aware that there are a lot of different issues to be discussed, so I intend to ensure that all delegations that wish to do so have the possibility to express their views in plenary. Where possible, I will strongly encourage statements to be made on behalf of groups of members and on behalf of constituency for observers. Delegations are also reminded that any statements they wish to upload on the session's website should be sent to the secretariats under the email address displayed on the screen. This may allow you to emphasize key points during your plenary intervention and include further details in the full-length statements to be placed on the website. We have put in place a dedicated queuing system for observers. On every observer seat, there will be a microphone. You will find a QR code with instructions. So please follow these instructions if you wish to request the floor, and feel free to approach any of our secretariat staff in the room if you require assistance. So I now open the floor for statements on behalf of regional groups. After that, for political groups. I would like to remind delegates that the time limit for group statements is 5 minutes. So I see on my list the Philippines on behalf of the Asia-Pacific states, followed by Ghana on behalf of African states, and Uruguay on behalf of GRULAC. So I give now the floor to the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, heads of delegation and members, on behalf of the Asia-Pacific Group, I would like to seize this opportunity to convey our region's heartfelt gratitude to the Republic of Kenya for the generous hospitality and excellent facilities it has provided in hosting the third meeting of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. We would also like to extend our sincere appreciation to the Chair and the Secretariat for their dedicated work in preparing this meeting, most notably the development of the Zero Draft. We look forward to constructively engaging in this session to further progress our work in a well-balanced manner, particularly on the appropriate principles and other elements currently shown as placeholders. And in this regard, we call to attention the Chair's explanatory note contained in the Zero Draft stating that the committee may decide to include new provisions or remove certain existing proposed measures. We look forward to reaching a decision on the mandate and modalities for future intersessional work, especially on the technical and scientific aspects, as well as those relating to means of implementation. The APG reiterates its commitment to constructively engage in negotiations towards an ambitious and pragmatic, effective, progressive, and inclusive international legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution globally, including in the marine environment. With this in mind, the APG wishes to highlight the following points regarding the agenda item. 1, the importance of engaging in good faith and striving to reach consensus in decision-making. Bearing in mind the mandate of UNEP Resolution 5/14, we call for a comprehensive life cycle approach to more directly address the issue of legacy, present and future plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. The Zero Draft's emphasis on certain measures has raised concerns within the group that these may have wide and unintended socio-economic impacts and implications, and therefore the group takes note of calls for greater balance in the draft text. This may also include the need for more focus on recovering and removing or remediating the legacy plastic. We stress the need for a science-based approach complemented by the incorporation of traditional knowledge, knowledge of indigenous peoples, and local knowledge systems. We recognize that various measures can contribute to the sustainable production and consumption of plastics, and also recognize that improving circularity of plastics is one of the important elements of this instrument. In this regard, we take note of the discussion regarding an overarching obligation to enhance circularity of plastics, taking into account national circumstances and capabilities. Discussions on obligations and the means of implementation must go hand in hand and must be part of substantive provisions to take into account different national circumstances and capabilities. Providing timely, appropriate, and adequate financial and technical assistance, as well as developing modalities for technology transfer on mutually agreed terms, will be key for the implementation of this instrument. We believe that national action plans should be an essential component of the instrument, ensuring we take country-driven actions throughout the life cycle of plastics for addressing plastic pollution, guided by the instrument. We also emphasize the importance of international cooperation and coordination in ending plastic pollution, and the Asia-Pacific region has an abundance of experience in this field to build on. Recalling our shared ambition to complete INC's work by the end of 2024, we must use our time wisely by identifying and prioritizing discussions on the basic components to operationalize the instrument, while avoiding duplication and promoting complementarity among relevant international conventions and instruments. Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, heads of delegation and members, we would like to reaffirm our commitment to having constructive and fruitful discussions with our distinguished colleagues from other regions towards a successful outcome of INC-3 in Nairobi. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Philippines on behalf of the Asia Pacific. I give now the floor to a representative of Ghana on behalf of the African Group.
Mr. Chair, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to deliver the statement on behalf of the 54 countries of the Africa region member states. The Africa Group wishes to extend sincere gratitude to UNEP, the people, and the government of Kenya for hosting the third Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meeting in Nairobi. We congratulate the INC Chair, the Bureau, and the INC Secretariat for the successful organization of the meeting. We have confidence in your able and collective leadership, and we look forward to a continued collaboration. We also wish to thank you, Chair, for the zero draft text of the instrument, which has provided Africa, under the leadership of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, the opportunity to reflect and deliberate on plastic pollution. As a region, we embrace the comprehensive life cycle approach to prevent plastic pollution. On chemicals, polymers, and problematic plastics, the Africa Group calls for sustainable consumption and production of primary plastic and eliminating specific problematic polymers, chemicals, products, and applications of concern. Africa calls for measures for full transparency and information disclosure along the entire plastic value chain. On the just transition, Africa acknowledges that implementing the future instrument may lead to job and livelihood losses, as well as other socio-economic impacts along the plastic value chain. Therefore, as a group, we call for this instrument to take into account the national circumstances and ensure a fair, equitable, and inclusive transition for affected populations with special consideration for people in vulnerable situations, especially women, children, the youth, and waste pickers. On waste management and legacy plastic pollution, the Africa Group calls for an instrument that operationalizes the waste hierarchy by prioritizing waste prevention and reduction before recycling and management. We further call for effective measures that ensure environmentally sound waste management practices at different stages, namely the handling, collection, transportation, storage, recycling, and final disposal. The instrument should include effective measures to ensure cleanup and remediation of legacy pollution in all environments. On the financing mechanism, Chair, the Africa Group stresses the need for a new dedicated multilateral fund to provide the necessary, predictable, sustainable, and adequate financial resources for countries in need to meet their commitments under the future instrument. The multilateral fund should be the vehicle for providing financial assistance to recipient countries on a grant basis for enabling activities and the incremental cost. On capacity building, development, and infrastructure, the Africa Group wishes to emphasize the need of advanced infrastructures and institutional capacity building and development for African countries to effectively implement the future treaty. On research, innovation, awareness, and education, the Africa Group calls for an instrument that facilitates information and knowledge exchange, international cooperation, and coordinating best available science on sustainable consumption and production, research and technologies, and indigenous knowledge. On private sector and stakeholder engagement, the Africa Group encourages parties to promote actions that will stimulate public-private sector partnerships and private sector investment in circular economy approaches along the plastics value chain. Stakeholder engagement is key to fostering an environment for building collective and innovative solutions to combat plastic pollution. The Africa Group calls for the future instrument to take into account the Bamako Convention prohibiting the transboundary movement of hazardous waste in Africa. On the synthesis report and outcomes of the preparatory meeting, the Africa Group calls on the members to reflect on the UNEP Resolution 514, which calls for ending plastic pollution, including in the marine environment and protecting human health and the environment, and emphasize the application of the relevant Rio principles within the provisions of the instrument. Furthermore, the Africa Group wishes to thank the Chair and the Secretariat once again for the zero draft text, the synthesis report, and the report on the preparatory meeting, and looks forward to constructive discussions that will lead us to the first draft text of the instrument for consideration at the fourth session of the committee. We look forward to adopting clear mandates and timelines for intersectional work required for the fourth and fifth sessions to move us all closer to an ambitious, legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution. And finally, Mr. Chair, the Africa Group requests member states to support the hosting of the Secretariat of the future instrument at the headquarters of the United Nations Environment Programme in Kenya. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ghana for his intervention on behalf of the African group. I now give the floor to a representative of Uruguay on behalf of the Latin American and Caribbean group. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, I am honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of Latin America and the Caribbean countries, GRULAC. We would like to thank the Republic of Kenya and the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, for hosting this important meeting. In addition, we would like to commend the Chair, Ambassador Gustavo Mesa Cuadra, his team, and the INC Secretariat for their diligent preparation of the Zero Draft, which fully responds to the mandate given at INC-2 and reflects the deliberations and views expressed at INC-1 and INC-2. We welcome the Zero Draft as a basis of negotiation for this session. Furthermore, we would like to welcome the upcoming chair from our region, Ambassador Luis Vallas Valdivieso, to lead this important process. In this regard, our expectation is to spend this week on substantive discussions and deliberations. For that purpose, the swift establishment of the contact groups is imperative, as we seek to respond to our mandate to deliver the instrument by INC-5. As GRULAC members with small delegations, given our limited resources, we welcome and support the proposal from the Chair that no more than 2 contact group meetings will be held at the same time. In addition, should informal consultations on specific issues of the mandates be convened, no more than 2 meetings will be held at the same time across the INC. As a region, we kindly request that this approach be kept throughout the INC process. Recalling Resolution 5/14, GRULAC would like to reiterate our commitment to developing an ambitious and effective international legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, with the view to protect human health and the environment. Our instrument must contain obligations and control measures that cover the full life cycle of plastics and complemented by voluntary measures, taking into account national circumstances and capabilities of developing countries, and be supported by robust means of implementation. In addition to this, the instrument must promote circular economy approach and international cooperation that will result in sustainable production and consumption of plastics, research and innovation, education, and powers awareness raising. We stress and support that all GRULAC countries are developing countries as such, are entitled to and should be provided new and additional financial resources, transfer of technology, capacity building, and all means of implementation that will assist them implementing the new instrument. We also highlight the unique vulnerabilities and circumstances of small island developing states, SIDS, which are disproportionately affected by the plastic pollution crisis, in spite of contributing very little to its creation. This is by no means an easy task, but we are confident that it can be achieved. Mr. Chair, plastic pollution adversely affects our health, ecosystems, the economy, the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030 Agenda, and the enjoyment of human rights, including the rights to health and to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, as interlinked to other environmental crises such as climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, impacting developing countries the most. This is a major concern in our region. GRULAC firmly believes that the key principles of international environmental law should guide the interpretation and implementation of the instrument provisions, including the Rio Principles as per the Rio Declaration of Environment and Development. Additionally, it should be guided by the principles of just transition, including an inclusive transition for waste speakers, the promotion and protection of human rights as a cross-cutting guiding principle, a gender perspective, intergenerational equity, non-discrimination, access to information, transparency and accountability, coherency among existing MEAs, and the use of the best available science, traditional knowledge, knowledge of indigenous people, and local knowledge systems. In addition, the future instruments should promote decent work throughout the entire value chain of plastics, including waste pickers and other workers in informal and cooperative settings, especially to protect workers from occupational health hazards in the plastic sector, as well as communities exposed to multiple harmful chemicals applied in the manufacturing of plastics. We should ensure that the transition is just and inclusive for waste pickers and recyclers, as well as to empower them as active stakeholders of sustainable development. Science must be central to the effective implementation of the instrument, and the establishment of a scientific and technical subsidiary body will be critical. This body must be of a multidisciplinary nature and have equitable geographical representation and gender balance. GRULAC supports the identification and adoption of criteria to determine hazardous chemicals and additives, plastic polymers, and plastic products that negatively impact human health and the environment, to ensure a circular economy approach, to improve product design, eco-design, and sustainable consumption and production, as well as to evaluate accessible, affordable, safe, and environmentally sound substitutes, alternative materials, and technologies will be essential to deliver an effective instrument. The aforementioned will require the development of a strong scientific basis guided by expert assessments and ensuring transparency from all stakeholders, including the private sector. Means of implementation are pivotal aspects of our negotiation. The GRULAC calls for a robust financial mechanism, which may include, but not limited to, the creation of a new fund, synergies with existing MEAs, the provision of technical assistance programs, and schemes on technology transfer in mutually agreed terms to effectively support developing countries in the implementation of the future instrument. Moreover, a phased approach in implementation of the instrument by developing countries is imperative, as the international community will commence the implementation of the instrument from diverse starting points. As the main outcome of this negotiation round, we would like to move forward agreeing on a mandate to the Chair to develop the first draft of the instrument in the upcoming intersessional period, based on the views expressed by countries in this meeting. Furthermore, a formal intersessional process is required to discuss means of implementation, technical aspects related to control measures, criteria for chemicals, polymers, and plastic products, whereas the discussion on principles and definitions should be advanced at INC-3. In the interest of moving directly towards substantive negotiations, we have decided as a group to keep our national interventions brief, and we will send the full text in written. Finally, GRULAC looks forward to working together constructively with the stakeholders, with all stakeholders, to advance substantially in the development of an instrument to end plastic pollution, safeguarding our environment and protecting human health for present and future generations. I thank you.
I thank GRULAC for his intervention. I now give the floor to a representative of Samoa on behalf of the small island developing states. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to deliver this statement on behalf of the 39 members of the Alliance of Small Island States, or AOSIS. Firstly, let me allow me to thank the Republic of Kenya for its warm hospitality and generosity, as well as the Chair's team and the Secretariat for their hard work in organizing this meeting and producing the zero draft for the consideration of our members. Mr. Chair, today we are reconvened at the very venue where this process began with the adoption of Resolution 5/14, the first step toward the development of an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. Throughout the INC sessions that followed, our message has remained clear and consistent. We need an ambitious, effective, and equitable instrument that addresses a full life cycle approach to end plastic pollution once and for all. We will do so constructively and swiftly as the accelerating global plastic pollution crisis continues to disproportionately affect small island developing states' livelihoods, health, economic growth, and development, terrestrial as well as marine environments. The agreement must ensure ambitious actions across the full life cycle of plastics with new, additional, adequate, and predictable means of implementation, a just transition, and specific support provisions for SIDS, including priority access, especially in areas where SIDS are disproportionately affected. We must build a universal instrument that is inclusive of all member states and enjoys broad-based support. AOSIS views the zero draft as a starting point for our discussions at INC-3 and looks forward to working with our colleagues on its enhancement toward the development of a first draft in advance of INC-4. While the present zero draft offers many of the ideas and solutions proposed by states throughout the INC process, we wish to highlight a few following key matters. 1, for chemicals, polymers, and plastic products, obligations should be commensurate with the level of risk or harm that the chemical, polymer, or product poses to human health or the environment, with clear criteria, processes, and definitions to identify these materials. 2, obligations and implementation measures in the instrument shall include the full recognition of the special circumstances of SIDS. 3, the instrument must prescribe appropriate processes to allow for the use of best available data, science and information, traditional knowledge, knowledge of indigenous peoples and local knowledge systems to help inform the compilation of annexes, the development of timetables, and the regulatory actions required. These processes must include relevant assessments on implications for SIDS. 4, the design of obligations and measures, including listing of chemicals, polymers, and plastic products, must take into account domestic context, the availability of safe, accessible, efficient, economically feasible, environmentally sound, and sustainable alternatives, cooperation and coordination with existing relevant frameworks or conventions which cover the relevant substances, as well as adequate transition time. 5, regulation of abandoned, lost, or otherwise discarded fishing gear, or ALDFG, containing plastic, should occur beyond the waste management section to more effectively target one of the largest sources and types of marine plastic litter. The remediation of legal plastics in the marine environment, including in areas beyond national jurisdiction, remains a critical issue for SIDS that requires a dedicated and comprehensive approach, especially given the unique geographic, technical, legal, and environmental circumstances. The interventions in this area must reflect the urgency of the matter, to include binding obligations to address past, present, and future plastic pollution. 7, means of implementation, including a financial mechanism, must consider the special circumstances of SIDS and specifically target priority areas for SIDS, including, but not limited to, waste management, recycling, remediation, technical assistance, access to technologies, and reporting requirements. We continue to consider the suitability of EPR given our minimal levels of production, resources, and capacities. And finally, given the pervasive nature of the global plastic pollution problem, the instrument must encourage strong action from all levels of stakeholders and across all sectors towards fulfilling the objective of the instrument. We look forward to dedicating our collective time, energy, and effort to constructive and productive discussions on these matters and others, as we all strive towards building the most effective instrument, as we agreed to do right here in Nairobi. Unsustainable production and consumption of plastic and the leakage of plastics into the environment continue and are projected to grow rapidly. There is a growing body of evidence that traces of microplastics are being found in our bodies and the food web, posing risks to human health and the environment, particularly the marine environment. Devastating health, environmental, and socioeconomic impacts of plastic pollution on critical global ecosystems, particularly the marine environment, also persist. Mr. Chair, I take this opportunity to remind all that there is no time to waste. The SIDS are here to work, and we remain committed to this process. I thank you.
I thank Samoa for speaking on behalf of SIDS. I now give the floor to Spain on behalf of the European Union.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Thank you very much, Chair. On behalf of the European Union and its member states, I would like to speak in Spanish, although we'll also send you the version in English. Distinguished delegates, the European Union and its member states would like to thank our host, the government of Kenya, for welcoming us here to the excellent headquarters of UNEP for this crucial meeting in order to establish an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. We'd also like to thank the Secretariat of the INC and you, Chair, for moving forwards the intersessional period. It's a happy coincidence that this third session of INC is held in Nairobi, because we are at the midway point of the process in a city which is just a few kilometers also from the equator, the midway point of the world. From Punta del Este and Paris, and now we've come to a third continent. When we finish our work in 2024, according to the mandate of Resolution 514, we hope to have a global instrument with a global commitment in order to put an end to plastic pollution. Science has sent a clear message that plastic pollution is an environmental issue and a health issue, which is ever increasing. No matter how remote or isolated an area, it's very probable that plastic pollution is also there. Many types of substances then filter down into the environment and affect water, air, and food chains. One food chain, which we are part of. Therefore, over time, these substances end up within our bodies, in the bodies of our children and of future generations. We are going through difficult times and turbulent times for multilateralism. We feel the need to record the causes and objectives for which the United Nations was caused so many decades ago. We have learnt from the past, but we need to ensure we don't repeat the same errors. There are a number of multilateral environmental agreements, and they are always increasing, and they enable us to together face up to the main environmental challenges of the world. Recalling the words of the Executive Director of UNEP, environmental multilateralism is a powerful tool. We urge all delegations to take part in the INC negotiations with this spirit in mind, so that we could provide an example of constructive cooperation. The entire world is looking at us today, and they will continue to do so during this week. Therefore, it's our responsibility to reach an ambitious agreement which offers specific measures and actions in order to tackle all the possible causes and sources of plastic pollution throughout the entire life cycle of plastics. Only in this manner can we make a significant contribution to global efforts in order to effectively tackle the triple planetary crisis of climate change, the loss of biodiversity, and pollution. Achieving the SDGs and preventing other harmful effects to human health and to the environment. We need an instrument which has legally binding obligations for the entire life cycle of plastics. An instrument of this kind will enable countries to adopt adequate implementation measures to put an end to plastic pollution. A paradigm shift is needed for production, consumption, and the management of plastics and plastic wastes. This will provide economic opportunities and negotiation opportunities. We invite all member states to take this into account during these negotiations. The instrument which we aspire to create will create opportunities rather than burdens. The European Union and its member states has closely looked at the draft zero. Chair would like to thank you for all the work carried out in order to meet the mandate which was given to you at the end of the INC-2. We think that the zero draft covers many of our points of view expressed, but does omit some. Nevertheless, we would like to express our readiness to carry out more work based on the zero draft. The European Union and its member states is committed to taking part in the negotiations and discussions on the zero draft with all other member states within the INC. We believe it's important to understand everyone's positions, and we trust that throughout our deliberations we can achieve a convergence of opinions. Our goal for INC-3 is to take a decisive step forwards and to lay the groundwork for future negotiations at INC-4, based on a first draft of the instrument, which will be drafted by the chair and which will set out all the outcomes of this meeting. We recognize that there might be gaps in understanding at this stage in our work. That is why we want to urge all member states to work together constructively to set out a clear roadmap for the technical work for the intersessional period. We hope we can make the most of the time available to us and fill these gaps and achieve the mandate of Resolution 514 of UNEP 5. We hope that we can complete our work by 2024. We also hope to take part in a constructive manner in all negotiations for the future instruments, and we invite all delegations to also work with the same spirit in mind. We hope that we can meet the high expectations of the world for us. Thank you.
España.
I would like to thank the representative of Spain, says the chair, speaking on behalf of the European Union's member states for their statement.
Opening the floor for group of states, so please press your button if you want to intervene. I will now give the floor to representative of Palau on behalf of the Pacific Small Island States. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair, Palau has the honor to speak on behalf of the 14 Pacific Small Island Developing States. We align with the statement delivered by Samoa on behalf of AOSIS and that of the Philippines on behalf of the Asia-Pacific Group. We express our gratitude to the people and the government of Kenya for their hospitality. We are also thankful to UNEP for welcoming us to the place where our process was initiated. We commend your leadership and the continued outstanding support provided by the INC Secretariat, including in the intercession. Mr. Chair, we recognize the achievement of compiling the rich submissions provided by members and observers during the intercessional period. As the discussions on Saturday highlighted, and as captured by the summary of the co-facilitators of Contact Group 3, there are many elements that need further discussions and unpacking. We look forward to further engaging on these matters in the Contact Group under the modalities suggested by the Chair. The Pacific SIDS journeyed from the other side of the world to engage in INC-3, with some of us traveling over 50 hours. This is a testament to our commitment to this process, reaffirmed last week by our leaders at their annual Pacific Island Forum Leaders Meeting. We traveled far because, as highlighted by the President of Kenya, 23 million tons of plastics are released to the environment. More than half, or 40 million tons of plastic, end up in our oceans every year, and this is expected to double by 2030 under a business-as-usual scenario. We cannot let this happen. Plastics entering the region are polluting our life support systems and impacting our people's cultural, economic, and social ties to the environment and ocean, including threatening our people's food security and human health. Plastic pollution also undermines critical economic sectors of our societies, including tourism and fisheries. Moreover, this problem, which starts in many cases far from our shores, generates tremendous public costs, including for waste management. This is why we have prioritized our limited resources to robustly engage here. While we agree that the invention of plastic has helped improve lives around the world, this cannot be an argument to lessen the ambition of the future treaty. The modern world is addicted to plastic. This is a fact. The first step to stop addiction is to admit there is a problem. We did that with UNEP 5/14. Now is the time to set the plan. Quit the addiction, change our habits, and clean up. This is why this instrument must address the full life cycle of plastics, with measures applicable to upstream, midstream, and downstream stages, including legacy plastics, and to ensure that even the smallest state can fully engage and meet the strict obligations we are hoping to set by taking full account of the special circumstances of SIDS, including, among others, through the provision of adequate means of implementation. This planetary crisis, which is compounded by climate change and biodiversity loss, can lead to the demise of our human race and requires nothing less than a revolution. A revolution in how we produce, in how we consume, and in what we tolerate. And the revolution must start now. For the sake of time, I will refrain from detailed text on our priorities and positions. Our group is eager to start work on the substance tonight in the contact groups you have established and to use the zero draft as the basis for our discussions. I take the opportunity to thank you and the Secretariat for producing this document well in advance to enable us to prepare. We look forward to a constructive week, which will inform the development of a first draft well in advance of INC-4. I thank you.
I thank Palau for her intervention on behalf of Pacific Small Island States. We are hearing members of groups of states. If you want to intervene, please press your button. I now give the floor to Oman on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council. You have the floor.
Thank you.
This is a statement on behalf of the GCC, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, Kuwait, and my country. The GCC countries would like to express their high appreciation for the efforts that have been made to implement UNEA Resolution 514 on the development of an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including the marine environment, before the beginning of the meetings of INC-3. We would like to refer to the fundamental principles that have to be taken into consideration in the options submitted by the Secretariat. First, the importance of plastic in human life, which will contribute to the growth of international trade and economy with a view to implementing SDGs and achieving our obligations under the other instruments. It has to be based on the principle of leaving no one behind. It has to avoid any decisions that will lead to a crisis in the supply chains. Two, it is important that consensus be the basis of negotiations in order to avoid any policies that can be hard to implement or the implementation of which will lead to dire economic and social consequences. It is important to come up with clear-cut principles for cooperation among stakeholders and parties to this instrument and to take into consideration the circumstances and potential of all and capacities of the countries concerned with a view to achieving the goals by of this instrument by the end of 2024. It is important that the scale of this legally binding instrument take into consideration the sound management of plastic wastes and to guarantee a just transition that will enable developing countries to have access to technology and innovation in controlling and managing plastic waste. It is important to adopt sound policy in controlling these wastes with a view to adopting recyclable use of this plastic. It is important that we enhance the design of plastic production. In conclusion, the GCC countries would like to express its high appreciation for the chair and the secretariat for all the efforts that they have made to hold this session. We also would like to thank the government of Kenya for its warm welcome. We also would like to wish the United Arab Emirates all success in hosting COP28 on climate change. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Oman on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council. I now give the floor to Singapore on behalf of the coordinating body of the seas of East Asia.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies and colleagues, I'm honored to deliver this joint regional statement on behalf of 9 member countries in the coordinating body on the seas of East Asia, or COPSEA, a UNEP regional seas program for its working group on marine litter. In the interest of time, I'll be delivering a shorter version of the statement with a full statement to be uploaded. First, our sincere appreciation to Kenya for hosting INC-3 and to the INC Chair and Secretariat for their dedicated zero-draft preparation. We believe the success of the INC process relies on inclusive engagement of all UN member states and specialized agencies for constructive outcomes. Member countries of the COPSEA are fully committed to supporting an ambitious yet achievable and implementable international legally binding instrument. We are dedicated to engaging and collaborating with all member states for collective achievement. We believe that the international instrument should galvanize global action and cooperation on plastic pollution, encouraging practical, country-driven initiatives and that consider diverse national circumstances. It must promote broader participation while accommodating context-specific measures and nationally determined approaches for each country. The instrument must address all sources of plastic pollution through a whole-of-life cycle approach, including, among other things, product design and environmentally sound waste management, consideration of legacy plastics and transboundary flows, resource efficiency and circular economy approaches, while recognizing the important role played by plastics in society. We note that the importance of addressing abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear is recognized in the COPSEA Regional Action Plan on Marine Litter. We advocate for clear, science-based definitions related to plastic pollution, microplastics, circularity, and substances of concern in plastics. We seek clarity on harmful chemical substances within plastics and a common understanding of truly sustainable and economically viable substitutes and alternatives that avoid replacing one problem with another. EPR is recognized as one of the approaches that promotes reduction in environmental impact of plastic. Detailed designs and mechanisms could be tailored by each country through national action plans to suit their specific circumstances. Measures must be inclusive, sustainable, impactful, and just, and we encourage the development of practical and science-based solutions and the possibility of establishing a scientific advisory body. We welcome a robust, streamlined governance mechanism building on lessons learned from other MEAs that allows for coordinated action complementary to existing agreements. We encourage a discussion on the effective use of existing regional mechanisms, such as regional seas programs, to address regional priorities and localize global goals. It is important that the instrument allows for reasonable transition timelines for industries and markets to adjust. This will be crucial in ensuring the effective implementation of the instrument. We invite countries and stakeholders in and beyond the region to build on existing efforts to strive toward greater data comparability and transparency. The availability of updated and accurate data on plastic pollution will allow countries to better understand the areas where action is needed, develop fit-for-purpose and context-specific measures, and scale up their capabilities to tackle plastic pollution. We wish to recognize the efforts and initiatives of East Asian Seas countries and the region's determination and capacity to drive meaningful change. Given that the majority of COPSEA countries are developing countries, providing timely, appropriate, and adequate financial and technical assistance from developed countries through financial mechanisms set under the instrument is paramount, aligning with the principles of the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development. Coordinated capacity support must be provided to ensure meaningful engagement of countries with limited resources and technical capacity. This ensures an inclusive and effective agreement where every voice is heard and accounted for. We urge development partners to further coordinate their support to the region, to recognize existing efforts by COP-C and avoid duplication with a focus on coherent and ambitious action, capitalizing on synergies and addressing gaps. We urge regional mechanisms such as Regional Seas Convention and Action Plans to continue their support for meaningful participation in the INC process and to build capacity for implementation of the global mandate and tracking of progress. We encourage all members to engage in meaningful, constructive, and substantive discussions with a shared goal of developing an impactful international instrument to address the common threat of plastic pollution effectively and collectively. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Singapore on behalf of the coordinating body of the Seas of East Asia. I now give the floor to a representative of the Solomon Islands on behalf of the High Ambition Coalition.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, colleagues, as the newest member of the High Ambition Coalition to end plastic pollution, the Solomon Islands have the honor to deliver remarks on behalf of the coalition. The High Ambition Coalition believes the zero draft prepared by the Chair, with support from the Secretariat, provides a good basis to engage in negotiations as outlined in our ministerial joint statement, which is supported by 61 ministers of the coalition. We reiterate our call for binding provisions in the treaty to restrain and reduce the consumption and production of primary plastic polymers to sustainable levels, eliminate and restrict unnecessary, avoidable, and problematic plastics, as well as plastic polymers, chemical constituents, and plastic products that are of a particular concern due to their adverse effects on the environment and human health. Increase the safe circularity of plastics in the economy, guided by the waste hierarchy, manage plastic waste in an environmentally sound and safe manner, and eliminate the release of plastics, including microplastics, into the air, water, and land. The coalition continues to call for binding provisions in the treaty to ensure reporting and transparency across the value chain of plastics, as well as for the mobilizations of the means of implementation from all sources that are necessary to deliver action on the ground and to end plastic pollution. To enable timely and sufficient progress in the upcoming rounds of negotiations, we encourage all INC member states to immediately and constructively engage at INC-3 on the basis of the zero draft, with the goal of making substantial progress on the text. In this connection, we request the Chair, with the support of the Secretariat, to prepare a first draft of the treaty for consideration at INC-4 based on the discussions at INC-3. Launch technical work in the intersessional period to assemble the best available science, data, and knowledge to inform INC in its deliberation of the draft treaty text. We reiterate our shared commitment to working with all INC member states to build trust and common understanding in order to deliver the ambitious, legally binding instrument needed to achieve our common goal of ending plastic pollution by 2040. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Solomon Islands on behalf of the High Ambition Coalition. This was the last intervention by group of members, states. Since we are already it's already 1 o'clock, I think we will suspend our session and we will resume at 3 p.m. with individual member states intervention. The first in my list are Argentina, Angola, and Indonesia. So the session is suspended.